short tutorial, which I hope will be helpful to you when you summarize your article. I'll also briefly explain APA style. We will go over these briefly in class on Friday, but I wanted to make sure that you have something that you can go back to in case you have questions or are not sure what was discussed in class. A couple of helpful hints. We talked about it in class several times. I want to make sure that you choose a topic that is of interest to you, especially because you're going to read a lot about this article. You're going to spend a lot of time reading this article, and when you summarize something that you're actually interested in, it may be easier. Choose also something that is easy to understand. You can do that by reading the abstract very briefly, see if you understand the language. You can go through the article very briefly, see if you think if it is something that you can understand and summarize. If not, just go back into the databases like Info, PsycArticles, and look for something else. When you use the databases PsycInfo and PsycArticles, make sure that you filter out the non-peer-reviewed sources, because I noticed that some of you submitted articles that are not peer-reviewed. Also make sure that you click experimental studies, because I also noticed that some of you sent me review articles which are not experimental and not accepted for this assignment. When you send and write the summary, please make sure that you also add and submit the article in PDF format, because I want to see the summary and the article that you actually summarized. We've discussed this in class before. We talked about the several and different parts of a peer-reviewed article, and it usually contains an abstract, an introduction, a method section, a results section, and a discussion section. The abstract, as I mentioned before, is a good place to start. Just take a look. What did they do? What did they find? And then continue and go to the introduction. The introduction includes a statement of purpose. Why is this important to study? The background of the study, how did the researchers think about the study, and the lit review, which is what previous research has found and what others said about the topic. Then the researchers usually state the hypotheses. Not this is singular here, but usually it's more than one. And then, if you're lucky, you will see that they identify the independent variable, which is the variable that was manipulated, and the dependent variable, which is what they measured. In correlational studies, and you recognize them by seeing words such as we found a relationship, we found an association, we found a correlation, those two variables are not called independent and dependent variable, but they're called predictor and criterion variable. So look out for those, because a part of the assignment is to be able to recognize those. In the method section, you may find various subheadings. In the method section, you always find participants, and here it says subjects, but just make sure that whenever you talk about people, you talk about participants and not subjects. So what the researchers usually do is tell you how many participants, gender of participants, age of participants. So these are all pieces of information that are helpful and you can include in your summary. All the materials or settings of the study, if for example the study was conducted in a lab, or it was outside, or if people were on a desk, if they used any kind of machinery, if they used computers, pens, pencils, that is all pieces of information you'll find in the materials section. In the procedure section, you'll find a detailed account of what they actually did, because if in the future other researchers want to replicate the study, they need to know exactly what happened and see if they get the same results. And then you see an analysis, how the data was analyzed. This is not always present, but sometimes we'll find it there. The results section is maybe the most difficult part to read, because there's a lot of numbers in there. Usually what you find in the results is, for example, what kind of software the researchers used to analyze the data, SPSS or, for example, R package. Um, while I don't expect you to tell me exactly what the F value was or what the correlation coefficient was, I would like for you to spot if the results were significant or not. In the discussion section, which is, at least for me, the part in which there is more meat in it, because they, first of all, they explain, they summarize the lit review a little bit, and then they talk about the results, and they explain exactly what they found and why they think they found it or why they think they did not find it. So the limitations of the studies is, okay, we did not find significant results, or we did find significant results. However, we could have done a better job, I don't know, gathering or recruiting more participants because we had a very little sample size. Or the study should not be done in a lab and we should try to do the study somewhere else in a classroom, for example. And then they also address what ideas or what could be done differently in the future, which is areas for future research or future directions is sometimes the title. So when you start writing the summary, begin with introduction, read the introduction, please paraphrase, and please use proper in-text citations according to the APA manual, which you can either find on paper or you can go into the OWL Purdue site that I linked for you in Canvas. If you're still not sure, please go to the Writing Center. They are awesome. So state the hypothesis. What were the researchers trying to figure out? How did they do it? What did they manipulate? So the independent and dependent variables need to be explained as well. The dependent variables are usually the measurement. And then remember that in correlational studies, they are called criterion and predictor variables. Then move on to the methods. Who were the participants? How old were they? Gender? How many? From a university? Because sometimes if you do certain research at Stanford and you do research at Central, the results may be different. So make sure you identify those. What were the procedures? What did the participants do? Did they get into the lab? Did they sign an informed consent? Were they asked to sit, to stand, to take something, to watch something, to chew something? Just make sure that you have all those details. Then move on to the results. While I don't expect that you understand statistical analyses, I want you to understand if the findings were significant or not, and mention why they might think that they were not significant, which is usually discussed in the discussion section. And then summarize the discussion section as well, and make sure you do a good job on that, because the discussion section is, I think, the best section to find all these pieces of information. So this is the rubric I'm going to be using to grade your assignment. So I'm going to be looking at APA format, so make sure you are well versed on that. And then you got to identify the independent and dependent variables, or criterion and predictor variables if it's a correlational study. Give a brief review of the literature, so the introduction, then a summary of the method section, discussion, and then I'll be also checking spelling and grammar. Many of those spelling and grammar mistakes you can avoid by just using those grammar check tools, either Grammarly or just the normal spelling and grammar check tools that Word provides for you. Make also sure that you include a copy of the original article, because if not, there's going to be 0 points on that. So this is an example of what I summarized, the article I summarized in 2016. As you can see, I used just the title introduction, and then I summarized the introduction. This is just a piece of the introduction. It was much longer than this. I then lumped together the results and the discussion section, and you can see here that basically I used citations after a paragraph. Or here, to start a paragraph, here I mention the author's last name followed by the year of publication, which is the proper way to do in-text citations. Here, when you have it at the end, you have the author's last name and year of publication in parentheses, right? So the article is due October 25th at 11:59 p.m. You gotta submit it through Canvas, and I wanna make sure that you know that is gonna go through the Turnitin system, which is a plagiarism check tool. Make sure that if you're thinking about redoing the assignment, you need to deliver at least 1.5 pages of quality work. And by quality work, I mean I want to see the summary. I'm not interested in seeing my name, your name, the weather forecast for Seattle, or my shoe size. I just want to see your text. Make also sure that the reference that you put at the end of the paper is not at the beginning, but at the end of the document on a separate page. So the reference is not part of the 2-page requirement. Make also sure that you submit a copy of the article in PDF format with the article, because I need to know which article you actually summarized. If you have questions on APA format, you can either visit the Writing Center, which is at the library, or you can use this link I provided here for you. This gives you directly access, or you can go into your Canvas page and look for the link, because I provided the link for you as well. The reference that you need to provide, and it's only one because you're summarizing only one article, should look like this. You have the author's last name, the first letter of the first name, dot, parentheses, year of publication, the title of the article, and then you have the journal and the volume number. Those are italicized, and then you have the page number. If you have a DOI number, fine. If not, it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. Make sure that you have an indentation here. In-text citations, we talked about them during class last week. You have the authors, Smith and Jones, followed by the year of publication, which is always in parentheses, and then blah, blah, blah. Or you can also have it in blah, 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 and then you have in parentheses Smith, ampersand, Jones, and then comma, year of publication. We also talked about direct quotations. So when you have direct quotations, you put them in quotation marks, followed by author, author, ampersand, author, year of publication, and then page number. For your assignment, there's only going to be 2 chances for you to use quotations, and make sure that those are not block quotations. So this sentence is, in my opinion, already too long. When I use quotations only when there's a word or just a way of saying things that there's no other way to say. Your paper should be 1-inch margins throughout, double spaced. Use double spacing. I'll notice if it's more than double spaced. Use a 12-point font. I don't need 24-point font. Please use either Times New Roman or Arial. Your work should be at least 2 pages. If you're thinking about the redo, send 1.5 pages, and that's okay. You just won't get the points for the minimum requirement, but you'll get the chance to do the redo. Please make sure that you know my office hours, because if you have questions, you can always stop by. My office hours are every Friday from 1 to 3 in the Psychology Building in room 413. So this is how your references should look like. I want to remind you that the references, you should only have one reference at the end of the document on a separate page. And you have the authors here, Skywalker Luke and Jon Snow, Snow John, 2019. And then you have the title of the article, Is Winter Really Coming? An Analysis of Forecast and Mood. And then you have the journal, Psychology and Night Walking. I'm a huge um, I'm a huge fan of Skywalkers and Jon Snow, so Game of Thrones was, I think I watched twice. Just, yeah. So, what you need to do is make sure that you have a period after each initial. So, after the last, or the first name, you have a dot here and dot here. You have an ampersand here, it is not an and. The publication year should be in parentheses, so you have a parenthesis here. And the journal and journal edition should be italicized, which is, you can see it here. This is the journal and the volume number. Oh, yes, here. So this is for you as a guide. Again, this should be an ampersand. The title should not be underlined. This should be written out. And this should not be italicized. This is for you as a reference in case you are not sure how to do it. This is, again, the example of my summary. I have the author here, comma, and then first name, dot, 2011, the title of the article, and then I have the journal, which is italicized, and then the page numbers. I hope that this tutorial was helpful. Make sure you watch it because there might be 1 or 2 questions in the quiz on Friday. Bye.